third big Rajouri attack in 2023. Pak-China terror tango bleeds India. 4 brave hearts killed in action, 3 left injured. Troops retaliate in full force. Jaish proxy claims responsibility of attack. Rajouri, new Jammu and Kashmir terror hotspot. That is our top focus on India First.
4 young soldiers killed in action as they rushed to reinforce troops engaged in a counter-terror operation south of Pir Panjal. 3 more soldiers are critically injured. 34 soldiers have been killed in action against 27 terrorists south of Pir Panjal. Now, is this because of wide gaps and relocation of an entire division to the line of actual control after 2020? Is it time to rework the standard operating procedures to ensure that terrorists do not appear to be a step ahead of our braves? Terrorists have not only repeatedly ambushed our soldiers, but increasingly are filming it on body cameras. Is it also time to launch an Operation Sarp Vinash 2.0 to defang these snakes of terror? Is it also time to impose costs on Pakistan, a state sponsor of radical Islamist terror? I'm Gaurav Sawant. We debate without fear or favor. But as always, let's get started with the headlines at 10. Suspension showdown escalates. India Alliance parties stage a protest at Jantar Mantar in Delhi. Parliamentary Affairs Minister accuses Rahul Gandhi of instigating protests inside Lok Sabha. Opposition parties target the Narendra Modi government after the Rajouri terror attack. Farooq Abdullah rakes up Article 370. Uddhav Sena questions the crackdown on Pakistan's state-sponsored terror. Olympian Bajrang Punia returns his Padma Shri in protest against the newly elected wrestling body chief. Punia writes to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, says Betis are being forced to quit the sport. Priyanka Gandhi Vadra meets Sakshi Malik. 640 new COVID infections reported in India. 22 cases of the new COVID variant JN.1 detected so far. French President Emmanuel Macron will be the chief guest for Republic Day Parade 2024. Macron says he'll be there to celebrate with his dear friend Narendra Modi. The security forces have mounted a massive counter-terror operation south of Pir Panjal after 4 soldiers were killed in action and another 3 critically injured when terrorists targeted 2 army vehicles along the Poonch-Rajouri axis en route Bafleas. The terrorists seem to have melted away, either in the caves in the densely forested mountains or hidden their weapons and perhaps are hiding in plain sight. Either ways, there are wide gaps in the security grid. And is that a major reason for these repeated targeting of security forces? And are China and Pakistan operating in tandem to weaken India, not just along the line of actual control, but also the line of control? Four soldiers of the Indian Army shot dead by terrorists as they rushed towards an encounter site in Jammu and Kashmir. An encounter in the upper reaches of the Rajouri sector near Thana Mandi. Sources tell India Today this wasn't an ordinary ambush. As the army responded to the initial contact with terrorists, a puppet front of Pakistan's banned terrorist organization, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, called the PAFF, took responsibility for the attack on security forces, releasing what appears to be body camera footage.
There are reports that the location of the terrorists, has been traced. So that is why we can see that reinforcements are being sent, and in Indian Army personnel are moving towards the hilltop. And the priority is to locate the terrorists and neutralize them as soon as possible.
But the Rajouri incident is exploding beyond this battlefield in Thana Mandi. For starters, it's the third incident in this sector this year, where the army has suffered multiple casualties. Less than a month ago, 5 army soldiers, including 2 young officers, were killed in action not far from this encounter site. Earlier, in May 2023, 5 Army Special Forces soldiers were killed in action fighting terrorists in the same general area. 2 years ago, 9 soldiers were killed in action in 2 separate encounters in the Rajouri sector. A clear pattern has emerged. Despite overall levels of terror coming down across Jammu and Kashmir after the abrogation of Article 370, the Poonch Rajouri sector remain ablaze with high casualty incidents. And this is where the story escalates. Top defense sources have told India Today that both Pakistan and China have been actively cooperating to trigger a new wave of terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. The aim is to put pressure on the Indian Army to withdraw troops from the eastern Ladakh sector and redeploy forces south of Pir Panjal. The reason? In 2020, when the India-China standoff began in eastern Ladakh, as part of the effort to bolster force levels at the friction points, including near Galwan, the army had pulled out units of the Rajouri-Poonch area and redeployed the uniform force in Ladakh. This created a major force gap in this area, providing a clear opportunity for the China-Pakistan nexus to reactivate terror south of Pir Panjal. While China gains from pressure on the Indian Army to possibly consider redeployment of troops from Ladakh to Poonch and Rajouri, the Pakistan Army gets to drum up emotions in view of elections on the corner in Pakistan. With Sunil Ji Bhatt in the Rajouri sector and Manjeet Singh Negi in Delhi. Bureau Report, India Today. And I quickly want to cut across to the Dera Ki Gali area in the Rajouri sector. Kamaljeet Kaur Sandhu joins us live from there. Also with me on this special broadcast is India Today's Shiv Arur. But Kamal, to you first. What's the latest in the current operation? And if you see a series, Kamal, somewhere down the line, terrorists appear to be a step ahead of our security forces. How are we recalibrating?
In the past 26 months, there have been 8 major terror strikes and over 30 soldiers have been killed in action. Now, this is a concerning trend, especially because it's all happening in Rajouri-Poonch region. Now, overall, there may be a decline of 66% from 2018 to 2022 in terms of terror-related activities. This is as per the MHA report in Parliament. But meanwhile, what is discerning is the number of encounters and number of attacks which have gone up in this particular region of Pir Panjal. The The challenge is obviously coming in from a particular module, which may be called as the Ghaznavi or the PAF, but we've been told it is the same particular module, and they go into hibernation after carrying out an attack. And the fact that there is a high number of casualty as far as security forces, especially the Indian Army, is concerned, there is obviously a dire need for change in strategy. Now, there is an ambush-like strategy which was utilized even as there was an operation going on in Thana Mandi in Rajouri area. We've been told that despite having pressed drones and the dog squads, there were also few people who've been picked up for questioning. There is obviously a lot of pressure on the Indian Army to ensure that these particular terrorists are neutralized. But remember, the terrains are so difficult. There is a thick green foliage. There are natural cave-like cavities. This is where the terrorists know their hideouts. They're obviously also getting logistical as well as local support, and that is where they have been carrying out these particular terror activities, which seems to be an act. But remember, this is also a Gujar population which is very pro-India, which has been very, very supportive of all the activities done by the Indian Army. So at this point of time, to operate in such an area where they're looking at information which could have been leaked about not just this 2 convoy, whether it was a spotter, whether it was information, all this now needs to be looked into, and obviously what is required is perhaps a change of strategy. There are many defense experts who would have much more to say on this, but clearly a big challenge for security forces.
It indeed is, and the fact that we've lost more than 30 soldiers in the past year plus is an indicator that the terrorists somehow happen to be one step ahead. Shiv, is it then time to launch an operation Sarp Vinash 2.0, look at somehow to bring the civilians out of some of that area, even if it's for some time, and then go after these terrorists, all guns blazing?
A multiplicity of factors, as you well know. A possible thinning out of troops in some sectors, not necessarily just in Rajouri or Poonch, could be one of the reasons why certain perceived gaps are being used, or, the patrolling gaps may have been manipulated by, border action teams from the Pakistan side. But apart from that, south of the Pir Panjal range, the level of violence, the number of infiltrations, the number of encounters that have taken place, completely fly in the face of a drop in violence levels in every other part of Jammu and Kashmir, including places, like Sopore, Pulwama and other places which usually see a lot of encounters. Post the abrogation of Article 370, the Rajouri Poonch sector has stood out as, a very troubling flashpoint. Post 2020, after the standoff in Ladakh began, it's become even more pronounced. So in 2021, 9 army men killed in action in 2 separate encounters. This year alone, 3 separate incidents in which so far 14 people have been killed in action across 3 separate encounters and incidents is something that simply cannot be ignored. Now, whether this requires a Sarp Vinash type operation, a proactive, multi-pronged operation, and you actually reported it, Gaurav, in 2003 in this very sector, in Rajouri or Poonch, where 65 terrorists had been identified in difficult, hiding places that are pretty much a feature of this high altitude sector near the line of control, and to actually go on the front foot, not be defensive, but hunt them. The hunt for snakes, the destruction of snakes, that's what Sarp Vinash means. Is this what the order of the day really is? We'll have to actually wait and see. But one thing is very clear, as far as Rajouri and Poonch are concerned, some kind of proactive operation is going to be required. This will have to move away from just the localized tactics, the retributive cycle of violence that takes place at the unit level on the line of control. Yes. This is going to require something much, much bigger. Whether it is a Sarp Vinash 2.0 or something even bigger than that, we'll have to wait and see. But ex-chief after ex-chief, expert after expert are all unanimous. This is going to require something that perhaps hasn't been done before.
Oh, absolutely. This is way out of the ordinary, and I have, 2 of the finest voices on counter-terror operations, Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain and Mr. S.P. Vaid. General Hasnain commanded Srinagar-based Chinar Corps. Mr. Vaid was former Director General of Jammu and Kashmir Police. Both of them join me on this broadcast, and we'll continue talking to them. But before that, I want our viewers to know a little more about Operation Sarp Vinash. Gaps had been created in the security grid on either side of Pir Panjal ranges in Jammu and Kashmir in the summer of 1999 when Pakistan Army occupied the Kargil heights. Troops were then rushed from Poonch, from Rajouri, from Pulwama to Kupwara to push back the Pakistani soldiers during the Kargil war. The Pakistani terrorists then exploited these gaps in the security grid in Jammu and Kashmir. A massive 4-phase counter-terror operation was mounted in Poonch and Rajouri in 2003 called Operation Sarp Vinash, or destruction of snakes. I had reported that operation in 2003 on ground. And the question is this now time for another version, for a new Sarp Vinash 2.0? During the Kargil War of 1999, a large number of troops were pulled out of counter-terror grid in Jammu and Kashmir and pushed up on the Kargil heights to push back against the Pakistani soldiers who had infiltrated all along the Mashko Valley, Dras, Kaksar, Kargil and Batalik heights. South of Pir Panjal in early 2000, a large number of Pakistani hybrid terror teams had established their bases on the higher reaches surrounding the Poonch and Rajouri towns. There were a spate of terror strikes targeting both soldiers and civilians all along the Jammu-Poonch-Rajouri axis. The army intelligence inputs indicated the presence of more than 100 terrorists in the mountains of Hill Kaka around Poonch and Rajouri. The counter-infiltration division, Romeo Force, was tasked to draw plans to evict the Pakistani intruders. Phase 1, November to January 2002-2003, prepare the helipad and multiple mule tracks. Phase 2, from February to April 2003, take control of adjoining commanding heights. Phase 3, between May and June 2003, clear the area around Hill Kaka of all civilians. Phase 4, between June and July of 2003, mount multiple operations on the Poonch-Rajouri heights. In the 4-phase sustained operations, more than 65 Pakistani terrorists were neutralized, including border action teams of the Pakistan Army that comprised doctors of the Pakistan Army treating terrorists in the caves around Poonch and Rajouri. The remaining terrorists fled back to Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, resulting in breaking the back of the terror outfits south of Pir Panjal. However, with the relocation of troops to eastern Ladakh in 2020 post-Galwan, terrorists backed by Pakistan have once again established bases in the higher reaches along the Poonch-Rajouri heights, clearly indicating it is time for a Sarp Vinash 2.0. Gaurav Sawant in Delhi for India Today. I want to bring in General Syed Ara Hasnain and Mr. SP Vaid into this conversation. General Hasnain, your appreciation of terrorists repeatedly targeting our security forces and succeeding. We've lost 4 terrorists just now. We've had a spate of these incidents south of Pir Panjal, sir.
Gaurav, I've been following your story just now. Very well researched, extremely well projected and presented. Let me make 1 or 2 corrections. I am a military historian myself as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, and I have been studying the operations since 1989, the way they have been conducted. In 1999, this area of Hill Kaka came to be occupied primarily because 25 Infantry Division had to change its orientation from the depth areas right onto the line of control because of what was happening in Kargil. There was no Romeo Force at that time. Romeo Force was raised subsequently in the month of September, October of 1999. You are absolutely right. In the valley, a similar thing was happening. The whole 8 mountain they had lifted up from Handwara, from the Rajwar forest, from the Hafruda forest, and moved to Kargil. I was the Colonel GS of the Victor Force, which took over this complete area. And I'm aware that even Pakistani officers, SSG officers, were involved in leading these operations to occupy these vacant spaces in areas like Handwara, the Meganwar Ridge, and places like that. This is a repeat of something like that, which is being attempted again in this area of Rajouri Poonch. I do not go along with the assessment that because of the lifting of troops from the south of Pir Panjal to eastern Ladakh, these gaps have been created.
Okay.
Those gaps have been created in the Udhampur, Riyasi area where the uniform force was deployed.
Yes.
There is no change in the deployment of a Romeo force here. What you definitely need is some more troops to come in here. There were many, many more troops here in the early part of the millennium. There was a division from the northeast, which was here. There was a division from within the command resources, a reserve division here, which incidentally has redeployed into certain areas, which I have been told. So there is no shortage of troops as such. What is important is Pakistan is attempting to make itself relevant all over again. They tried this in 99, if you remember, in 98, 97, 98, we had started gaining the supremacy at that time, and in 99, this whole grand strategy was played out by Pakistan to try and take the initiative from us. This is exactly what is happening. They have tried to localize it to the area of Rajouri Poonch because they don't want to bite off too much. They know what is happening in Jammu, in the Kashmir segment. They know what is happening in other parts of J&K. This is, they feel, probably a manageable with 30, 35 terrorists holed up here in difficult terrain to carry on.
Or, sir, are they planning, are they preparing?
If I may just add, Gaurav, yeah.
Is this a firm ground? Are they preparing a firm base? Right now, shoring up their defenses in Poonch and Rajouri, and in the coming summer and spring and summer, they'll launch their attacks in the Kashmir Valley just before 2024 elections. Is that what is happening? And I want to take this to Mr. Vaid.
Yes, definitely. Let me, before you take it to Mr. Vaid, let me answer and confirm what you have said is almost entirely right. Some kind of a base is being created here so that return of a militancy, return of terror into the Kashmir Valley, that is the intent ultimately. Because it starts from somewhere,
yes.
The aspect of creating relevance for themselves, attracting a tremendous amount of attention towards them, and getting forces to come and carry out operations.
Sir, we expect our forces to be a step ahead of these terrorists, illiterate radical Islamist terrorists. They cannot be a step ahead of our security forces repeatedly for an entire year plus.
They will not be a step ahead, Gaurav. I can assure you this is a temporary setback. In a year, 2-3 such setbacks will take place, especially in the waning times of terrorism and militancy.
Okay,
I do not believe that the terrorists have got the better of the army out here in this area.
Okay, Mr. Vaid, all of this cannot happen without local support. OGWs of terrorist organizations helping these Pakistani terrorists, a hybrid group. There are some intelligence inputs that seem to indicate they are retired soldiers of the Pakistan army. Sir, 75 years plus after independence, how is it that Pakistan can succeed in fishing in troubled waters in a part of Jammu and Kashmir where the Awam is so close to the security forces?
Gaurav, good evening. I was listening to General Atta Hussain, esteemed colleague and senior who has a hold of Jammu and Kashmir, and also Shiv and your presentation, absolutely superb. But let me add just few points. Number one, after losing ground in Kashmir after abrogation of Article 370, I personally feel this Operation Rajouri Poonch is an attempt by the establishment of Pakistan to change the narrative of return of peace after abrogation of Article 370. This is this particular region is being basically targeted with that intention and inflict as many casualties on army. Look at the pattern of attacks. Most of these attacks are happening on Indian Army's contingent. It is a sort of tactics of jungle warfare. Draw the forces to an area where they have an advantage, where they are sitting on the heights, they are amongst the thick foliage, where they have places to hide, boulders, caves, and this is what they are doing. Inflict as much casualties. And absolutely, I tend to agree with your presentation that China-Pakistan nexus is there. It is an attempt to ensure that army gets spread further.
Yes.
Jammu region, which was largely free of terrorism since last 15 years, see the pattern in last 1.5 year, how Rajouri Poonch of the Jammu region is being uh, specifically targeted. Last 15 years, one odd incident used to happen. A group of 2 or 3 terrorists would cross the international border from Samba Kathua and
Yes.
get intercepted by J&K police and Indian army somewhere on its way to Kashmir
So
and
what
get
explains
get
this
neutralized.
this frequency, this spike in these incidents, and General Hasnain, and the failure of our security forces, if I may use that word with a lot of grief and pain, our security forces are not being able to remain a step ahead of these terrorists, and it's been on for a year plus. You know, our forces can be ambushed once, you can be ambushed twice, but if you're ambushed the third time, it would reflect that we are not outthinking the terrorists.
I tend to agree with Ved Saab completely that an attempt to draw them into the jungles, particularly in the rocky layer of the lower element parts of the Pir Panjal, is being made, and we are sort of getting attracted by that. You are absolutely right. I remember conducting certain operations in the Hafruda and the Rajwar forest, where a similar kind of a approach was followed by the army, and we used to invariably go in and suffer casualties. You may remember
Yes.
Major Sharma's famous incident in 2008, 2009, and similar such incidents which used to take place. Now, I don't want to reveal what the kind of things that we can do, but let me tell you, there are lots and lots of means. You don't have to be all the time on the move. You can be static. You can occupy certain areas. You can carry out population control measures. You need not always offer your targets to the terrorists on the other side. You need to create targets out of them. Get them to be on the move.
Absolutely.
I'm sure
Smoke
there
them
is
out.
a new,
Starve
there is a
them
new
out.
leadership. There's a new leadership now coming up as far as the army is also concerned, in 16 Corps and in Northern Command, perhaps in the near future. Probably we'll look at them to come up with some more fresh thoughts and ideas, although the current leadership has done a marvelous job, there's no doubt about it. But there is definitely a need to rethink their methodologies by which some of the lower tactics, operational level is fine, but some of the lower tactics which have to be probably looked at afresh.
Because it just appears, Mr. Ved, intelligence inputs come in, either through signal intelligence or human intelligence. There is a contact established. That's almost like standard operating procedure. The moment a contact is established, reinforcements go in, and then those reinforcements are targeted. The main terrorists may have melted away into the jungles or the caves once again. It's the terrorists with their body cams hiding behind trees on roads that carry out the terror strike and again melt away. Sir, that local population in that area, do we require better vetting of local population and who are outsiders who may be coming in and going back, sir, from those areas?
Absolutely, Gaurav. Very little intelligence is coming up. There's a lot of scope for improvement of intelligence. They are not using mobiles, even technical interception, the police is handicapped. It's much of internet-based communication with their masters in Pakistan. As far as human factor is concerned, I think there's a lot of scope in roping in local young boys. Maybe you recruit them as special police officers in police and with the army and with the operation groups. These very young boys of Rajouri, they're very brave. I've seen them fighting in Kashmir,
Yes.
very nationalist. Maybe some of them are helping them. After all, this group of 27 or 30 cannot survive without local sport, without
Absolutely.
local wherewithal. Identify those people and use local boys to dig them out of these caves. And Pakistan generals, what they have done, taken a group of 40, 50 criminals, trained them, armed them with whatever M4 or whatever
Their
armored
carbines.
piercing
Yes, sir.
carbines, and sitting comfortably in Islamabad and watching the scene how Indian army is suffering casualties. I think we need to understand this and then counter it in a similar manner to Pakistan, and let's use local young boys who will dig them out. I'm confident
Sir,
of their
one
capability.
quick question, General Hasnain, I'm running out of time on this part of the show, but one quick question. Is it your apprehension that the spring of 2024 could be really hot, not just south of Pir Panjal, but then these terrorists could just go across the Pir Panjal, get into South Kashmir, get into Central Kashmir, North Kashmir, and Kashmir could flare up just before 2024 elections?
That apprehension is definitely there, Gaurav. But I'm sure 15 Corps on the other side is equally well prepared, and they have enough troops and a very good, strong grid, as you're aware. But I will answer one more question of yours, which you had raised in the initial commentary which you have given. That is the aspect of Sarp Vinash 2, whether it's required or not. Well, to my mind, not at such a high level.
Yes.
But that was a full force level of operation. I would say a brigade level kind of an operation, and particularly in the winter when the foliage is down. I'm sure Ved Saab would agree with me that in this area, right down to the lower levels of DKG, etc., you'll find much lower foliage coming in the time of winter. Hideouts will be more available, which will be more visible, and a brigade-size operation to flush these out will probably send a sufficient kind of a force into the mountains. They may be forced to flee into Kashmir, and you'll find that 15 Corps on the other side will be the ones who will be hunting these terrorists there. It's happened in 2003,
Yes.
and this is something that we could similarly do again.
Absolutely. I'd reported that operation in 2003, and I'd be very happy to report the death of terrorists, the way our security forces hunt them down and neutralize them. General Hasnain and Mr. Ved for joining me here on this India Today special. Many thanks. Ayodhya